All right. Good evening, everyone. My name's Tim Wong. I'm from the Office of Environment and Heritage, specifically the Markets and Finance team. Our unit is tasked with helping the business sector with finance to support the uptake of clean energy. And when I refer to clean energy, I'm talking about energy efficiency opportunities and renewable energy. Today, this evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about the market in terms of the energy market, what's going on, the implications for business. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in this space to help businesses understand the sort of financing options that are available. And I'll run you through some of the resources that we've produced to help businesses better understand what options are out there. And then I'll close up with some sort of more general comments about where the market is at the moment. So just talking about energy markets, I think everybody's aware that things are changing. Energy costs have gone up over the last few years. We've got things such as tariff reform is underway in the way that retailers charge customers. There are discussions underway in various states across the country about how that's going to pan out. We've got more distributed generation happening. Solar's been obviously is being taken up by residential sector and more recently the commercial sector is getting interested because these sort of opportunities can be quite compelling for businesses, and businesses are becoming more aware of how it can assist them in their operations. There are new technologies coming in, such as storage. You've probably heard a lot about storage in the media. The technology's there. We've probably got to wait a little bit longer until it becomes cost effective for most people, but it's another indication that the energy market is changing and the way you use energy, the way you buy energy, will be different in the years to come. And there are even new business models. And virtual net metering is just one where people will be able to sell energy from one business to another. So that could change the way you invest in renewable technology, and there will be a need to fund a lot of this. So as I was saying, in years gone by, businesses were really sort of passive, along with households. Your electricity bill would arrive and you would pay it, and you had security of supply and you switched on the lights. But with the hike in prices over the last 5-8 years, it's become more of an issue in businesses, and depending on the nature of your business, it could form a big component of your operating costs. And if that's eating into your margins, then you've got to do something about it, like you would on labour or any other components that you're dealing with in your operating expenses. And businesses are taking a more proactive approach to managing energy in their organisations. And energy efficiency and solar PV are sort of typical examples of the sort of things that are going on now. Role of finance. Look, clean energy makes good business sense. Obviously it helps the environment, reduces emissions, but everybody's running a business, you've got cash flow, you need to pay salaries. There are good, rational business reasons why investing in clean energy makes a lot of sense. You might say, oh, well, I'm going to put $100,000 into, more manufacturing. Or I might spend $50,000 on dealing with energy. That might be a more productive way in the short term or the medium term to support your bottom line. It really depends on the nature of your business, but energy efficiency and renewables can be very compelling in terms of return on investment and how it can assist your business in the long run, and also help future-proof your business for the likely changes that are to come with what's happening in energy markets. So finance can address funding issues. you've only got so much money in the business, you might want to move it away from your core operations. So financing can give you that flexibility. And like everything else, there's a cost associated with taking that sort of option. So it can act as a substitute for working capital, and that means you can bring projects online like renewable energy without sacrificing your core business goals. And often, depending on the nature of the project, the energy savings can pay for part of the repayments. In some instances, it can pay for all of it, but it really depends on the nature of the project. What we're doing in government is primarily around the provision of information to the market because, one, there are a lot of new products coming to market. There are a lot of different players in the market. So you've got traditional banks, credit unions, you've got finance brokers, you've got energy service companies, solar companies, and all with different financing options. And for a lot of customers, this can be confusing. So some of the work we've done is really focused on just going through the basics, the sort of things that you need to understand when you look at financing a clean energy project and getting people across the basics. We've done that with the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Finance Guide, and all this stuff's hyperlinked and you can get on the USB stick. And this will take you to the sections on our website where these online resources are available. The first one, the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Finance Guide, was written as a print product. So if you want to, well, that's probably not environmentally sound, you can print the whole thing out as a PDF and go through it, or you can go through the more juicy bits online. As a byproduct of the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Finance Guide, we went on to do more work around financing solar PV investments. There are two guides, one's for businesses, the other one's for residential, and we dive into more detail around the sort of things that you should be aware of when you're using finance for solar. So we look at things like power purchase agreements, which are a more recent creation of the market, originally coming out of the States. There's a lot of people offering them. They've got things to offer, but like any product, there are pros and cons, and we talk about those. And at the end of this session, if you guys want to ask me some questions, we can go through that. And away from just the provision of information, the government has the Environmental Upgrade Agreements program, which is a form of commercial loan. Our team runs that. That's more for commercial building upgrades, if you want to do chiller, lighting. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the slide. We're also progressing with that. So the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Finance Guide, as I said, it covers the basics of what to look at when using finance. It also looks at the most suitable financial products around particular technology types. You know, chillers, a chiller can cost you $500,000. And if you put 6 of them in, there are different sorts of products that you should use because maybe you want to own that product. If you want to own it, then you might be going for a capital lease or some sort of commercial loan. It's not necessarily something you'd want to put on an operating lease. So the guide goes through a number of technologies, including things like power factor correction, lighting, and it looks at, in a fairly sophisticated way, the sort of cash flows that you can expect based on the sort of products you're using, the total cost of that type of financing using typical interest rates. And we have spreadsheets which do all that, so you can download them and you can play with them and plug in figures, and it can show you what's, what would be a more suitable product for you based on your circumstances. One of the things that it does is it walks you through the sort of decision-making process. And I mean, this all sounds like common sense, but you've really got to ask yourself, if I buy some solar panels or some other form of equipment, do I want to own the technical risks? Or do I want to outsource that to somebody? And there are PPAs are a good example. That the risk really sits with the PPA provider, the power purchase agreement provider. They own it It sits on your roof or your landlord's roof, and you get basically a cheaper cost of electricity. The downside is potentially you're locking yourself in for maybe a lengthy period of time, but that might be suitable depending on your individual circumstances. You might have a 10-year lease and you're happy with that cost of energy. You nail that down and you can focus on other aspects of your business, like selling more widgets. So we run through things like, do we want it on the balance sheet? No, then we'd look at things like operating leases, energy service agreements, power purchase agreements. If we're happy to have it on the balance sheet and we want to buy the equipment outright, it will run us down through the various products that you could use. So it just steps you through some of the logic, and there's a lot more detail when you go into the guides, and the spreadsheets and the cash flow models will help you better understand what is potentially a good product for your business. And we don't mention specific brands or banks when we're looking at it. We'll just say commercial loan or operating lease, but generally they're fairly generic. So there's a whole bunch of products out there at the moment. You can self-fund, and we've found a lot of businesses, if they've got enough cash in the business, they might just self-fund, and they look at the return on investment and they go, well, we're pretty happy with this. Our business is better off 24 months later than if we hadn't spent the money or we put it in a different area of the business. There are commercial loans available from the banks. Asset financing is a big one. That's where the banks will just, they traditionally used it for things like forklifts. They can pull the asset back if you don't meet the repayments. There's a lot of that being used for commercial solar. Some of the banks will also do energy efficiency. All the banks and some of the credit unions also do leasing. It really depends on what your preferences are. There's power purchase agreements out there. Environmental upgrade agreements are for slightly larger projects. I spoke with a provider out of Victoria just a couple of weeks ago. They're also providing finance into New South Wales for solar, and they're actually using a photocopier company. So this photocopier company provides finance on photocopiers, and they figure that solar, it has a similar sort of profile in terms of the customers. So they'll do a no docs loan and they'll turn it around in 24 to 48 hours. I just use that as an example of the sort of new products that are coming onto the market. In the guide, we talk about the pros and cons. Sorry, the typeface is a little bit, it's too small, you can't read it. But if you self-fund, you don't have any obligations, you don't have anything on your balance sheet. If you've got existing debt, you might be constrained. If you get a commercial loan, you're getting all the money up front and then you meet the repayments over time, plus you're getting the benefits from that energy efficiency upgrade or that renewable energy, and those cash flows can go to help you pay the facility. As I said before, we've got the financing guide for solar PV, and we really sort of go into a lot of the detail that you need to look at. Things like on power purchase agreements, you have a period of time where you've agreed to buy energy off the PPA provider. But one of the things that we make people aware of is that in general, that arrangement is based on generation, not consumption. So if you were to change energy consumption on site and you actually reduced it, you'd still be paying for the amount of energy generated by the panels. And that's something that consumers should be aware of. It's not on all PPAs, but it's on a lot of them. And there are other terms and conditions in there. So there's some of the things we cover off. like I said, it really depends on your circumstances. Some products will be more suitable for you than others, and it's really doing your due diligence and going through what your requirements are and what these products offer. That is online, and it's hyperlinked in the USB and on the PowerPoint presentation. So you can go in there and have a look at that. That's been very popular with people. We came up with this idea because we were getting sort of a lot of feedback from the market that people were kind of confused about what products were out there. People were sort of entering into transactions and installing equipment and not necessarily understanding the implications. And some stuff is kind of really basic, like some people didn't realise that when you have an operating lease, you didn't own the equipment. You know, I mean, it sounds silly, but those sort of basics we cover off. And we also point to simple things like, no matter what financial product you've got to look at the cost of energy in your business and work out over time, if I bought it by myself or I used a loan or power purchase agreement over that 15-year period that it was delivering value to my business, what have I actually ended up paying? Yeah, maybe you pay more money with certain products. If you didn't have the money in the business, perhaps that was something you're willing to pay for. But if it's a case that if you selected a particular product and you end up paying less interest and you get to own it and that's what suits your business's operations, perhaps that's a way for you to go. But you need to sort of do your due diligence and go through those sort of questions. I'll quickly talk about environmental upgrade agreements for commercial PV. To date, we've used them for commercial office block retrofits. So lighting, HVAC systems, but they can be used for any environmental works in a business. Hands up, are people familiar with environmental upgrade agreements?
I have a question
Yeah.
because in Victoria it's often used for residential, like medical, etc. Some of the groups.
Like Darabin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Darabin, One at Energy Foundation.
Yeah.
So that's not possible here as well.
Yeah, Darabin is an example in Victoria where the council offered effectively residential EUAs, which meant that they had a pool of money, and I think it was targeted at pensioners to put solar PV on their roofs so that they would deal with the cost of energy and be better off. And the way it works is that the repayments actually go through council, through the rate system. I'm not exactly sure how they do it in Darabin. With EUAs in New South Wales, it goes through the rate system, but it's actually a separate charge. But it goes through the same system and has all the same legal parameters.
So can we do it?
Not now. It's not available. And the issue with Darabin is it a repeatable model? Because Darabin had access to, and I don't know where the money came from, but I know it was a one-off source of funds. And then I think it was somewhere in the region of $800,000-900,000, and they funded all these upgrades. Plus, they helped aggregate it. They got all the households in. They got cheaper panels and that.
More than Energy Foundation is doing it. Bruce Thompson is currently advising.
I mean, I'm not in the residential team, but I can tell you, New South Wales, they're looking at it. Yeah, the issue is who's going to fund this, and do they because banks and other finance providers are businesses. They will look at these opportunities and they will look at the risks, and then they will cost it, just like they do when they give you your residential mortgages or your commercial lines of credit. And those costs may not be what the groups that are pushing or advocating for these sort of products. And I think the challenge there is to find sources of finance which meets the requirements of those sort of programs. So in New South Wales, it's for commercial buildings at this point in time, and you can do any sort of works which are environmental, and that includes things like energy efficiency, renewables, bike racks, change rooms because people aren't driving cars. All right, we're running out of time. So it's designed not to impact current debt covenants. It's not on balance sheet. It's paid through council rates. The money's not from the council. The money's from a finance provider such as a bank. The reason why council's involved is because they take a lien on the property. They're a party to the contract. It's not their money, it's the bank's money. And the reason council's there is because if anything goes wrong with the facility, local government enforcement policies apply. So that debt can be pulled back as senior debt. So before all other creditors, say it's the NAB or the ANZ, I'm just making names up here to use in this example, they will get their money back before any other creditors or mortgage holders. So what that does for the EUA, that de-risks the project for the finance provider so they can offer cheaper rates than what they would normally do because they stand in front of other creditors, plus they can go for longer periods of time. So operating leases, you can go out 6 or 7 years. Commercial loans, usually 3 years, and then they'll revolve them, they'll recheck your financials, and they'll put a facility in again. These things go for 10, 12, 15 years. So if you're putting a chiller system in, they run for 20 years. You want to match the costs of financing that with the benefits that flow over that period of time of the asset. So they're quite well suited to those long-term projects. And if you think of commercial solar, you can probably say the panels will last a couple of decades, the inverters will go after 7 years, or whatever the current state of technology is. So we've done them on commercial buildings. We're doing a bit of a push in Western Sydney at the moment around large industrial sites and talking to commercial property groups around using EUAs. And for sites over 100 kilowatts, it could be quite attractive because you've got LGC revenues that are going out 15 years and matching that up with a loan facility. Right, so just some closing comments and then we can do some questions if there are some. So there's new products coming onto the market, there's power purchase agreements, there's on-bill financing, and there are different people providing that from what we traditionally had. So you've got Origins out there and Energy Australia, and they're providing finance because they want to put panels in and do storage and things like that. Many existing products can be used to fund clean energy, and we speak to the banks, and a lot of these things are not badged as green loans or energy efficiency loans. They're just asset financing, operating leases. So if you've got an existing relationship with your bank, you can go and talk to them. Do your due diligence, shop around and see what's available. Finance providers are becoming better at understanding clean energy. One of the trading banks going back sort of 2.5 years ago, they didn't understand panels. You know, are we getting good cash flows from this? They didn't incorporate that into their credit assessment. They just looked at the business. You sell widgets, you make this much money, we'll make a decision around that. Now what they're doing is they're looking at, okay, you know, the panels are saving us this much on grid electricity, or the lights, energy efficiency. We're getting positive cash flows after a certain period of time. We're going to take that into account when we decide whether or not we're going to give you the facility. So it enhances the prospects of the project getting over the line, and more providers are taking this approach. So shop around, speak to your existing finance providers to see how they can exist and see what's in the market. And I'm getting told to close up. So that's a very short overview of the sort of work we're doing and some insights that we have. Encourage you to have a look at the resources that we have on the website. There's a lot of material there, and we've spoken to a lot of people in industry. Use that as a basis for understanding what's out there, and ask people questions. You know, does your product do this? What are the terms and conditions? And you will find there is quite a range of interest rates and product features. And there is a lot of money out there, and interest rates are still pretty cheap. And that helps facilitate a lot of these projects.